words come to us today from Exodus. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, "Every boy that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you should let every girl live." Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch, and put the child in it, and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. His sisters stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her attendants walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her maid to bring it. When Pharaoh's daughter opened the basket, she saw the child, and he was crying. She took pity on him. "This must be one of the Hebrews' children," she said. Then the child's sister, Miriam, said to the Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who took him as her son. She named him Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water." Thanks be to God.
So this morning we continue. All of Lent, we have been looking at this topic of engaging with racism. And this morning we're going to be talking about respect. I mean, I had to put Aretha, right? So now you've got that in your head, which I don't think is a bad thing. This will probably be more fun as a sermon. If it gets boring, just RSPEC. Well, in our house, I was excited because I thought we talk about that at least 3. So there's a lot of talk about respect where I live right now. Like, you face forward at the table. You don't put food on other people. You don't kick other people. But I think since we're grown-ups, we might be able to go a little bit deeper. We probably have that. Oh yeah, here's our respect. And so I'm going to offer us this somewhat long definition of respect as going beyond table manners and being about understanding that someone is important and valuable, that the other person should be treated in an appropriate way. And this is just a Webster definition. Respect is showing admiration, deference, or holding in high esteem. We're engaging with racism, right? So how does racism affect our respect? How genuine, how profound is our respect for people who don't look like us? Does our respect look like table manners? Or is it admiration? So for me as a white person, do I admire Black people? Do I hold high esteem for Latino people? Do I show deference to Asian Pacific Islanders? That's how I'd like to frame this time when we reflect on respect. And what does our theme of respect have to do with the story of Moses? Because that's our scripture for this morning. So I'd like to go back through, just to discover it together, the story of Moses. And this time, as I tell it to you, I'd like you to think about who you respect in the story. Do you have any experience of respect as you hear the story? There's a little bit of backstory to the story, which is that in the first chapter of Exodus, we learn that the Hebrew people who moved to Egypt because of Joseph, right? Joseph was kind of one of them. That they had really grown in population, and that the Egyptians were using them as slaves for forced labor, but that the Egyptians were getting really nervous because there kept becoming more and more and more Hebrews. So the first thing that Pharaoh does is he tells the midwives to kill the children as they're born, if they're boy. And the midwives defy him, and they don't do it. So then we come to what we heard in verse 22, where Pharaoh says, okay, I'm going to send out a command. Like, I'm going to make it law. Male child, born to the Hebrew people, river. So that's the situation. Jochebed, we know that's her name from later in Exodus. She becomes pregnant. She's a Levite. She's of the priestly tribe of the people of Israel. When Moses is born, he's like beautiful, right? He's healthy. There's something about him. And so she just cannot bear to do it. And she hides him until he's 3 months old, and he's 3 months old. So she can't hide him any longer. She makes this basket, and she finds a place where Pharaoh's daughter is going to be. I think she expects him to be discovered. She's counting on that. And she sends Miriam, the older sister, to keep an eye on the basket. So Pharaoh's daughter, with all of her attendants, is down in the river, and she sees this basket, and she can't really tell probably what it is, so she sends a servant, go get that basket. It's probably, I think the scripture says, on the river bank. It's not actually in the water. So the servant goes, gets the basket, brings it to Pharaoh's daughter, and once she gets the basket, she can hear, the scripture says she can hear Moses crying. He's probably freezing, right? He's 3 months old. Pharaoh's daughter opens the basket and has pity on him. And the daughter of Pharaoh isn't naive, right? She says, this is one of the Hebrew children. She knows. So we can kind of imagine how many babies were in that river. How many Hebrew children were drowned or died from exposure because of Pharaoh's command. Moses isn't the only baby in the story, right? All of the male children. We know that it was this population, that there were a lot of Hebrews. A lot of children were murdered by Pharaoh. Imagine living in that situation. So here's Miriam. She's a young girl. She's following along. She sees Pharaoh's daughter pick up the basket, open it up, pick up Moses, and then she steps forward. And she doesn't say, please make it. No, she just says, I'm going to assume you're going to say yes. Can I go fetch you a nurse? And then Miriam goes and gets her mother. Miriam goes and gets her mother. So see what's happened. Now Moses' mother nurses her son, raises her son, and she gets paid to do it. She gets paid wages from Pharaoh's daughter. So Moses grows up. I mean, yes, he becomes, he goes to the palace, whatever it is, and is recognized as Pharaoh's daughter, but Moses knows who he is. Moses knows he's Hebrew, right? Because he grew up on his mother's breast because of his sister, and we see that in the scripture later. And so Moses, this is the story of Moses' rescue through his mother, through Miriam, through Pharaoh's daughter, and that Moses, as we just sang, who will let his people go, who will lead them on out of Egypt and into their destiny in the wilderness. So who do you respect in this story? Anybody? Anything? Who's this? The princess. The princess. The princess for standing up and saying, I'm going to intervene in this case. Yeah, because as the kids pointed out, surely people knew. They knew, right? Because Moses is weaned. I don't even know how old he is when he goes back to the palace, but he could have been like 12 maybe before his mom took him back. So it's known, absolutely.
I say his mother.
His mother.
She had that.
Yeah.
Put him in the basket. She put him up there.
Yeah, made the basket, put him out there.
It wasn't just gonna throw him
Right, right.
in. Years for acting.
Miriam, yeah. For me, I thought she was scared as a kid. And it's interesting, we know the punchline, right? Like, we know that Moses then leads the people, da-da-da-da. But if we didn't know about Pharaoh's command, if we just started at the beginning of chapter 2, I think it could be easy to be judgmental. Like, what mother takes her child and puts it in a basket and puts it in the river, right? When we see the system, when we know, this was law in the land, this is what's happening, all these children are drowning, then we see, she's trying to save her son. I think it's easy to judge others, to imagine what we would do if we were them. But we don't know what it's like. And I think especially for myself as a white person, I don't know what it's like to navigate our society as a person of color. I think it's more than just getting the cold shoulder on the bus. It's not getting that job, right? It's not getting the job or getting the medical treatment or the bank loan. That's what the system of racism in our country is about. It's not about one person's hurt feelings, but about a system of social control. And that system includes the criminalization of people of color. So I noticed that Moses' mom breaks the law to save her son. I notice she breaks the law to save her son. And I think about how people survive and the strategies people use to survive. I've had a friend who's African American talk about her mom fudging the boundaries to get her to a better school, right? Forging a doctor's note in order to go to parent-teacher conference. And I wonder about what we respect. What do we respect? What does it mean to be respectable? When we think about respectable behavior, I think we often think about following the rules, doing as we're told. And so I got ahead of myself, but I wanted to show you this cartoon. And I'll read it, I guess, because it's kind of maybe not hard to see. Okay. How not to get shot by a cop. So here's the person speaking. Number 1, don't argue. Just do exactly what the police tell you to do. Number 2, don't make odd movements. Keep your hands high and in sight. 3, don't wander the streets drunk or high on drugs. Makes sense. 4, don't wear hoodies and sagging baggy pants like some gangbanger. Okay, so now here's a kid with, I think he's got a beer in his hand. Bro, thanks for the advice. And the black professional says, actually, you don't have to worry. And the cop here says, young man, is this black person threatening you? So I just wonder, like, if we were on the streets, which of these people would we automatically feel like we could trust? Who would we have respect for? And obviously not all cops are like this. This is pointing out a mechanism, something that happens, but it happens enough, keeps happening enough, that we could start to see it as maybe a pattern, right? It's more than just once. And honestly, like Mr. Sagging baggy pants, I don't know if he might actually not be more comfortable for me than the other folks.
I'd go for the guy in the suit.
You go for the guy in the suit. But my point here, I guess, and bringing us this cartoon, is that we're taught to respect the system. Right? Maybe I don't trust it, but I definitely respect the person with the badge. I mean, they've got a gun. And the system isn't fair. It doesn't take care of everyone, right? We know that slavery was legal, segregation was legal, and now profiling, mass incarceration are legal. And so one of the rules we respect, I think, is about not talking about race in this way. And if we're white, about not challenging it. But what does the scripture say? Where do we think God is in this? Well, from one perspective, like I said, Jochebed, Moses' mom, and Miriam are really crafty. They break the law, and then they get paid by Pharaoh's daughter to raise their own son, which some might call working the system. But others might say that any system that is built on genocide, on a law that children are thrown into a river, deserves to be worked over and dismantled. A municipal system that poisons its children with lead, as is currently happening in Flint, Michigan, that system does not deserve our respect. And that, I would suggest, is what our scripture shows us. That God, our God, makes a covenant with a people who resist, who break the law to survive. And because of the resistance of many women, the great prophet Moses survives, and eventually God takes that system down and leads God's people out of slavery. I mean, the scripture isn't uncomplicated. There are those plagues that come. Some it's messy. But remember that video that we saw, and the young woman who goes into the convenience store to buy the milk, I wonder for myself about how many times I'm listening to that voice in my ear. That creepy guy in the film. I would suggest that the creepy guy is at work everywhere, that it's systemic, and that discrimination, that racism persists in every workplace, every school, every shop, every court of law, every police station, and mortgage office, and restaurant, because some of us respect the system more than the people in it. We respect the system more than the people in it. And so I think we need to hear more stories about what it's like to be a person of color and how to survive. This is Teresa Rayford, who's a community organizer, and I've marched with her and done activist work with her, and someday when I have more time, I will tell you the parts of her story I can share. I'm going to lift up a story in our peace moment, but for now, I just want us to challenge us to learn more stories of what it's like to navigate this system and to resist the system, the one that we live in today. We need to not only respect but celebrate the lives of Black, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, Indigenous people as an act of resistance. And as a mom, I think my white daughter needs to see me give deference and high esteem to Black leadership in order for her to have those possibilities of that way of relating in her life as she grows up. So what do you respect this way? Do you respect the system? Do you respect God, who makes a covenant with those who resist? I tell Ellie, how you act is just as important as what you say. If you say, yes, Mommy, but you do not mind your shoes, then you're not being respectful. So what does your behavior, what does our behavior say about who we hold in high esteem?